Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. Today it's pretty much a dragon special because so much has been hinted about. There are new Twilight Dragons, new Black Dragons, even actual canonical mentions of the Dragon Isles. There's a lot to talk about here, with many of these dragons being important enough to, well, actually properly serve as villains for players, or at least be a major part of a patch. So we're going to kick it off with the Twilight Dragons. Now, they were thought to have all been destroyed during the Cataclysm when, of course, we defeated Sinestra, we also defeated Wrathion, and the resurrected Onyxia. That kind of just ended a lot of the Twilight Dragon-related stuff. And yeah, we essentially thought they couldn't make more of them. Now, what was actually special about these Twilight Dragons? What made them different? What even are they? What's their story? Well, their story starts off years ago before Vanilla. Syntharia, aka Sinestra, was experimenting on creating a new type of dragon. Her eventual creation, the Twilight Dragons, were the result of experimentation of regular dragon eggs, aided with draconic artifacts and even a nether dragon. So the Twilight Dragons that were eventually produced through this process were extremely powerful. They had the ability to pretty much drain magical energy, but they proved to be unstable and very hard to control. Still, the eggs were saved. Now, years later, of course, Wrathion tried to create his chromatic dragons, but he, of course, failed. And while both those attempts did fail, Deathwing would later on use the lessons learned by both to create his own Twilight Dragons, who served as primary antagonists, of course, during the Cataclysm expansion. Now, we thought they were pretty much gone, but we're actually wrong in thinking that, with both Legion and Battle for Azeroth advancing their story. So during the Shaman Legion Order Hall campaign, players journey to Deepholm, and when they're there, they meet the Mistress of Twilight. Now, she has a few very interesting things to say. The blood of Syntharia flows through my veins, and her voice whispers to me from the dark beyond. The Twilight Dragonflight lives, and our destiny is at hand. Even in death we shall endure. Mother, I return. Well, what does this mean? First, it kind of confirms, yeah, the Twilight Dragons are pretty much active. Next, it confirms that Syntharia is basically alive in spirit, or maybe that something is impersonating her. Now, if the latter is true, then it could be, Void Whispers, maybe N'Zoth pretending to be her, which, once again, that would, of course, find us fighting, Void-aligned dragons, which is pretty much what happened in Cataclysm. Now, if Syntharia is still somehow alive, then I guess really that storyline would be the same, and she would be a major new villain. Now, her being in the Dark Beyond, that's kind of interesting. It probably just means the Shadowlands. It could be space, which is of course called the Great Dark, or some sort of void plane. We tend to see a fair few of those. So there you go. We knew in Legion that they were active. Well, the next hint is in Battle for Azeroth during the Island Expedition content, where of course we run into Twilight Dragons, and we find a battered Twilight scale, and we decide to take it to Grim Batol, where a disguised red dragon is scoping out the area. Now, she is already quite aware of this Twilight activity, claiming that when she concentrates, she can feel the heartbeat of thousands of tiny creatures, saying that she has no idea how many more eggs remain. Now, that is actually confirmation that there is an army of Twilight Dragons just chilling out deep in Grim Batol. Now, remember that while they may be eggs, I believe the Twilight Dragons could be rapidly aged, and that means that they actually could be a viable army in not that much time at all. So, Syntharia is active, and there is a whole army waiting for her. It would not take much for her to, I guess, get a physical form again, and for those eggs to go through the process of hatching and rapid aging. Now, if N'Zoth was to spring his trap during Battle for Azeroth, as it very much seems he will, then yeah, bringing back an extremely powerful black dragon, with Syntharia, as well as an army of Twilight Drakes, yeah, that does seem to be a pretty sensible move for the guy. So that's the Twilights covered. They very much still are in play, but what about the Black Dragons? They really have been in an odd spot, with Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, of course, both heavily focusing on Wrathion as a character. It really did seem like the Black Dragons would play more of a role in the game, but that clearly has not been the case, with Wrathion, of course, setting off the Warlords of Draenor expansion, then touring Alt Draenor a bit, with his last confirmed actions being that he's just roaming Azeroth, which is, yeah, fairly nondescript. Now, back in Legion Alpha, well, Wrathion, of course, was Ebonhorn, and he was there to get his hands on uncorrupted Black Dragon eggs. Of course, that storyline was cut in alpha because it did not make much sense for Ebonhorn to be such a new character to the High Mountain and still have so much respect, and that led to the creation of Abyssian and the establishment of his history with the High Mountain Tauren. Well, during Legion, we see him say that he has family matters to attend to during the Neltharian's Lair dungeon, and that leads to me speculating that maybe him and Wrathion were meeting up, and that's pretty much what his, disappearance in that dungeon would be. Now that is a plot line that could allow for the core point of the alpha version of the Black Dragon storyline to progress. That of course is that the Black Dragon flight could be restarted by finding a bunch of uncorrupted eggs. So that's pretty much what was going on in Legion, and then of course we also know that Abyssian was doing a lot of work to hold back the sort of old god forces at High Mountain. Of course, the Black Dragons, though, they appear in Battle for Azeroth again through the Island Expeditions, where we pick up an unscarred Black Dragon scale. Now, the scale is described as being small and undamaged, likely coming from a young dragon. So we decide to hunt down Wrathion, but instead we bump into one of his agents outside Blackwing Descent. And this agent really has quite a lot to say. Have you heard of the Dragon Isles? Few have, and fewer have been there. We have not found others of the Master's kin forthcoming in information. Should you uncover anything further in your travels, we will be awaiting a visit. That's fairly major. I mean, it's actually really, really major. First, they've been seemingly interrogating other Black Dragons. Now, that's kind of interesting. I assume they've, tried to get Abyssian to talk a bit? They've ended up getting nowhere. Maybe they found some other Black Dragons somehow? Maybe ones that are still corrupted but roaming about the place. Now, of course, those eggs from Neltharian's Lair would probably play a role here, but that the dialogue here doesn't really suggest that, unless those dragons have grown up very quickly indeed. Now, the next thing that he mentions is the Dragon Isles, and bear in mind that he talks about the Dragon Isles after telling us that we would be compensated with information, so him letting us know about the Dragon Isles is sort of us being compensated with info. Now, what are the Dragon Isles? Well, this is a very big topic. Well, it's a small topic, but it's an interesting one. I think it's big in importance, because the Dragon Isles are actually quite old, dating back to early days of WoW development. They, it actually goes way back to the original content plan for the game, a content plan that was very different from what we would eventually get. In this plan, the Dragon Isles were to be an old god-themed area covering the level 65 to 70 bracket, notably having a raid. As for where it was, well, if you look at this very old sketch of the Eastern Kingdoms, you can see a cluster of small islands near Quel'Danas, and if you look at this other image as well, you can see there they are in the original content plan. Now, this just all sort of lines up with what we know about the original WoW plan, and indeed those three islands were actually in the main in-game map for years until Wrath of the Lich King changed it. Now visually we have a few things to go off. We've got art and a model. Now this concept art is again from way back in the early days of WoW development. It actually featured in the vanilla credits and I believe the original WoW art book. So the 3D model then is a part of Designer Island. You can actually open that up. It's a map that's existed in the game files for a long time. And as you can see, it's a big squid-like temple that resembles the Shrine of Storms from Stormsong's Valley, which of course is a big old god-themed area, and that's where the old god-themed Crucible of Storms raid is going to take place in the not-too-distant future. Now, according to Jonathan Stats, they also designed a hermit crab-based temple, but that did not make it into the game files. Now, ultimately, they planned more than they could build with original WoW and decided to cut back from there. So the Dragon Isles, it disappeared for the same reason that vanilla WoW did not launch with Outland, Northrend, and the Emerald Dream. At the end of the day, they decided the core 1 through 60 experience had more than enough content, and there was no point in rushing the rest of that stuff out. And I think that's a very solid move given how high quality the full continent-sized renditions of Outland and Northrend ended up being. Now, what about these Dragon Isles? Well, for the longest time, they were not a part of the game canon. They only existed as a piece of development trivia. This is the first time they've been canonized in-game, and well, I think one thing is pretty clear. Their original purpose is no longer needed. We already have a big old god shrine with heaps of tentacles. We don't need two of them. Now, given the Dragon Isles a name and the likely resurgence of both the Twilights and the Black Dragon flights, it just seems to make complete sense that the Dragon Isles will instead be worked into a dragon-related storyline. Now, I'm not exactly sure how or why, given they are named after dragons, yet even Wrathion's agents don't seem to have the full picture of what they are. Chances are Blizzard will try to do something new that will maybe give us a stack of content. What could that actually look like? Well, a part of me wonders if it would be a Mechagon-like bit of side content, and maybe if Mechagon-like side zones are just going to be a part of more future patches of the game, providing Blizzard with a way to deliver a greater variety of content within a single patch, both in terms of visuals and story theme. If so, then we could see a small dragon-themed raid. Perhaps, we venture there with Wrathion to prevent the N'Zoth-allied Twilight flight from gaining a foothold. I think that would be not a massively lore-expansive storyline, but I think that would be a pretty simple one that they could really execute on decently easily that would absolutely slot into the core storyline of Battle for Azeroth in a pretty natural way. So, there you go. Dragons, they're probably coming back. There's a lot of hints, and it's very fun to dive into. So there you go, that's some lore. Thank you very much for watching this video, and yeah, with that, I'll see you next time.